Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Meaningful Connectivity, an Enabler for Global Growth. I'm Nisha Pillay, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator today. I hardly need to remind any of you here that we are living in the middle of a frenzied digital age. It touches every aspect of our lives, doesn't it? Jobs, access to healthcare, entertainment, the very relationship between individual, citizen, and state. We today, however, are going to look at just one of those relationships, the relationship between connectivity and growth, connectivity and jobs, connectivity and prosperity. And for that, connectivity alone is insufficient. It has to be meaningful. What does that mean? That's what I'm going to put to my eminent panelists. What is meaningful connectivity? How do we get there? What are the investments and priorities we need to make? And what is the prize? What is this economic prize that we seem to have in our title of our panel discussion? Let me introduce you to our very eminent panelists. We have with us from our host country, Georgia, Her Excellency Ekaterina Gundzadze, Deputy Minister of Finance. Welcome. From neighboring Armenia, the first Deputy Minister for the high-tech industry, His Excellency Dr. Gevorg Martasyan. Welcome. From Japan, Mr. Eigo Nomura. Welcome, Mr. Nomura-san. Director General for International Affairs from the Global Strategy Bureau of the Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. From the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Tomas Lamanauskas. Welcome, Thomas. From the UPU, the Universal Postal Union, Director General Marian Oswald. Deputy, okay, I've promoted him. That's all right. Between friends, we can have a promotion, can't we? To give us a regulatory perspective, the chair of BEREC, the European Regulatory Body for Electronic Communications, Professor Kostas Marcellos. Welcome, Professor. And for that all-important financial lens, we have Mr. Charles J. Cormier, Regional Director for Infrastructure Europe and Central Asia at the World Bank. So we've got some pretty cool guests here, right, to chew these important issues over, but we also want to know what you think. And for that, we have a lovely poll prepared for you. Let me introduce you to our Slido question. Make sure that you're all connected. Are you all on Wi-Fi? There's a little kind of an icon on your badge to help you get there. All right, and now if you just scan that QR code, it'll take you straight through to our Slido page, and there is your question. And it's a very simple question and yet a very difficult one. Which aspect do you believe is most critical for fostering meaningful connectivity in this region, the Middle Corridor countries? Skills development, infrastructure development, policy harmonization, or data flow? That means security, really, data security. And of course, the answer is they're all important, right? But we want you to decide what you think is the most important. You don't have to decide right away. I will keep reminding you in the course of the next hour and a half to pop your answers in there. And we will see what the eventual group decision is at the very end of our meeting. You can change your mind, by the way. You know, you might hear something from, for instance, His Excellency Dr. Martasyan, which will make you change your opinion. And in which case, just go and change your vote, right? So let's get going. Let's start with our host from Georgia. Your Excellency, Ms. Gundzadze, I've got to ask you the most basic and obvious question. What is meaningful connectivity? What is this enabling environment we keep hearing about?
Thank you so much. And since I represent the host country, first of all, I want to expand a very warm welcome again to our guests from different countries and agencies, and want to thank the organizers of the Tbilisi Silk Road Forum grand event after COVID-19. So we are really happy that we are back with this forum. And I also need to thank them for tricking me into this panel. As you already presented, I represent the Ministry of Finance of Georgia, so I don't represent a sectoral policy who drives different activities to achieve connectivity in digital sector, but obviously our role is cross-cutting and very important in all the sectors. I represent a generation who remembers life without internet, but at the same time my generation is natural to using Wi-Fi, internet and all the digital connectivity. But at the same time we do realize that it's not given. This needs investments, this needs efforts, this needs strategies and policies to be implemented to achieve that. So what we mean by meaningful connectivity, that is not just the basic infrastructure, that is obviously the high quality and affordable access to those connectivity services that then enables economic growth.
So I'm just going to stop you there. High quality, affordability, I heard you say.
And accessibility.
And accessible, okay.
Obviously, so otherwise if it's not widely spread, if everybody does not have access to that and not everybody can afford that, there is no use of having it into separate segments. What do we need to achieve that? How we can enable that? Since I'm representing here the Ministry of Finance, obviously there is something to do with fiscal policies, fiscal space, and it's not direct public finance investment in the infrastructure, but the policy and environment we create. The environment where with our tax policies and tax reforms and other related areas, we enable people to be in the competitive market, to create, to develop, and to bring a further success. And then to analyze where do we need to engage with public investment, where do we need to create an environment where private partnership is the best option.
And why is that so important? So that you can drive down prices?
Obviously, we need to drive down finances so the sector is affordable, and at the same time, from fiscal point of view, our resources are always scarce, so we need to be efficient, effective, and so we need to know where we need to invest and where we can just allow the private sector to do their job, to do their business. So this is why it is important that it's part of our fiscal policy planning. As the Ministries of Finance, we are very selective and very scrutinizing when we go into public investments, what we need to invest in and with what extent, what's the scope. So this is how the fiscal policy is helpful there. Then, of course, even more importantly, the sectoral policy, which in our case in Georgia is driven by the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. How they develop the strategies, how do they develop the sectoral policies so that they create that competitive environment, so the private sector and other stakeholders can have this fair market where they can engage and where they can develop further. These structural policies together with fiscal policies allows us to create the infrastructure, one of the responses in your question, as a joint effort, public investment and private investment, and then gives affordability by bringing down the prices, by making this more efficient and effective accessibility to wider public. This is how we in synchrony work together to achieve the strategy, which, for example, for our case is the strategy for 2020-2025. The ministry is, has developed and goes along that with that. But it's not only enough. Then we also need awareness building. We need literacy. We need education. We need human capital. People who can use the best of that benefits, the digital sector, broadband, whatever infrastructure. I'm not the expert of the terms you are using. For me, it's internet. For me, it's Wi-Fi. For me, it's my gadgets. For me, it's access to the global world, having a call with DC or with Manila whenever I want. So this is how we jointly, fiscal and sectoral
Thank you so much, Ms. Gonzalez, for getting us going. So we definitely heard from an economic point of view there, right? She was fleshing out that policy question in your choices, right? Which looked like a very boring option, but you can now see why it's so important from what we just heard from Ms. Gonzalez. I think we'll probably get a slightly different take on the same question from Dr. Mantashian, because he, of course, has the policy, his portfolio is Minister of Digital Technology. So what does it mean for you, then, delivery of meaningful connectivity?
First of all, I want to thank you for the question and the invitation to Georgian partners, and I want to say in Georgian, hello to everybody, and Gamar Joba. And we are very pleased to be here and being a part of this important dialogue. But I want to continue what my colleague from Ministry of Finance was saying. And of course, the economic part is very important. My science is about the economy as well. But when we talk about the meaningful connectivity, there's two terms, the meaning and connectivity, right? So when we talk about the meaning, I think it's about the purpose, why we need to be connected. What's the purpose? So just being connected, it can't be the target. So we are connecting the people, we are connecting the countries, and we are creating the infrastructure when the people who want to develop their talents or unbox these talents, they will have the access, affordable access, to the technology which can help them to develop their talents, to reach the bigger things. And here, previously we talked about this, I would like to tell in the audience as well. I like to do this comparison about why the connectivity is important. One of my colleagues in one of the African countries who was just being elected, his party won the election. He told me the story which is really giving the interesting perspective, especially in our fast-changing world, in our region as well. He was saying that when they won the election, one of the young I think not millennial anymore, the youngsters maybe will be the under generation, but reached him saying he was the first time participating in the election and voted for his party because he said, when I need electricity, it's hard, but I know how to find it. If I need water, I know how to find it. If I need food, I know how to find it. But if I need internet, I don't know how to find it. So you need to build the infrastructure to bring to somewhere.
You have to bring it to me.
You need to bring it to me, to my village, to my town, to my city. So this is a changing and opening up the new perspectives for the people, especially in the country of Africa, where the 50% of the population is younger than 30 years old, with all mobile devices. And in our region, when we have so many barriers in the past, and currently we're presenting, the Prime Minister of Armenia presented the new concept, the project, which today he highlighted, the crossroad of the peace, which is opening up the potential. It's not only having the corridors, it's having the open dialogues. It's a crossroad when you have a direct conversation. And I think this is touching and opening up, the unboxing the potential of the region. If we talk about the region where we are right now, but I think the concept is very important because this is not only the narrative, but it's also the philosophy and why we are doing this, to humanizing the technology and bringing it close to the human.
And the concept is universal, but thank you very much for putting the human factor right into the middle of our discussion. And I'll ask you more about that in a minute or two. Let's get the Japanese perspective now. So, Nomura-san, the Japanese economy is hugely connected, certainly in a meaningful way. Give us your perspective on what that actually means in practice. What makes it successful? What have you managed to achieve?
Okay, thank you, Nisha. As a representative of MIC Japan, I'd like to convey firstly my sincere appreciation of the government of Georgia for inviting me to this meeting. To answer your question, I'd like to start by talking about policy actions from Japan's point of view. Japan's late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe proposed the concept of DFFT, Data Free Flow with Trust, at the 2019 World Economic Forum in Switzerland. This concept aims to promote the free flow of data internationally, regardless of national borders, while ensuring trust about privacy, security, and intellectual property right, IPR. Such free flows of data can be beneficial for various business activities as well as the resolution of social issues. Based on this concept, Japan has been contributing to the spread of a digital society all over the world that shares the values of privacy, security, the protection of IPR. On the other hand, in order to everyone around the world to benefit from digitalization without being left behind, I believe that it is also essential to improve the communication infrastructure. Considering this issue, in Japan, our Prime Minister Fumio Kishida have launched the Digital Garden City Nation initiative. This concept aims to making the most of digital technology to solve social issues such as and enhance the attractiveness of rural areas while taking advantage of the unique characterization of rural areas as well as urban areas. To realize this vision, our ministry is focusing on the development of communication infrastructure in Japan, including such as fiber to the home, 5G home mobile networks, data centers, undersea cables, etc. As for cooperation with foreign countries, other countries, I'd like to introduce our memorandum of cooperation with Georgia to promote cooperation in the field of ICT. Georgia is a connecting point between Europe and Asia, and we are highly aware of the importance of ICT infrastructure through Georgia. As government Georgia explains, it could be a digital hub and corridor connecting Asia and Europe. Therefore, Japan is ready to contribute to enabling this movement. Also, Japan would like to cooperate with Georgia to spread the DFFT concept throughout the world. To this end, we would like to support the development of Georgia's ICT sector using Japan's experience with Digital Garden City Nation initiatives. Furthermore, in addition to G2G cooperation, it's also important, I believe, to promote cooperation on a business level. To achieve this end, it will be important to identify reliable business partners. Specifically, it is important that partners not only share the same values in terms of such as human rights and privacy protection, but also that they value diversity and are not dependent on the specific companies. Considering these points, Japan would like to examine areas where we can cooperate with Georgia while trying to involve relevant parties for promoting concrete cooperation. That's all.
Thank you very much, Nomura-san. So that was the data flow point in that question, right? It's the data flow with trust, in other words, secure data flow. Yeah, it's not going to happen if it's not secure. So if you want to vote for that, let's get a regulatory perspective, shall we now? We're not going to have a massive increase in infrastructure without policy harmonization and regulatory harmonization. I'm going to ask Professor Matsalos, can you give us your perspective with your BEREC hat on as to what meaningful connectivity requires?
Thank you. And first of all, I would like to say it's great to be in the Silk Road Summit in Georgia. And I'm really grateful to the organizers for having me here as a speaker. Well, digital transformation is progressing very fast. And at the same time, we have our climate objectives and challenges to face. So today we need to ride a twin digital and green transition in a kind of less than favorable economic environment of high debt, high inflation, high interest rates. But connectivity remains the platform for digital transformation. So if I would give the European Union perspective on this, European Union has defined two very ambitious connectivity objectives towards 2030. 1 gigabit per second connectivity for all users in Europe in fixed location, and 100% population coverage with 5G for European Union. But
we're a long way away from that, right? 100% coverage.
And maybe I can give some figures to this. Indeed, if we see the latest European Commission report published a couple of weeks ago, coverage with fiber in Europe is 56%, and in rural areas, 41%. And also, the penetration of fiber-based services is around 30%, according to the FTTH Council of Europe, although we see some improvement of penetration in higher speeds. And this is worse compared to other regions in the world, like United Arab Emirates, South Korea, China, etc. Same situation same status in 5G. So coverage of Europe with 5G is 81%, but this is using shared spectrum and 4G spectrum, so not taking the full advantage of the potential of 5G technology. Coverage with the C-band, which is a pioneer spectrum band for 5G, is 41%. And we do not exploit quite a lot millimeter wave spectrum. We do not develop 5G standalone that much, so we need to improve. And the same is true for the demand in 5G. We have lower indicative number of subscribers compared to other areas like South Korea. So deployment of networks is capital intensive, so we have to face investment challenges, and a recent report from European Commission indicates that we need something between 174 billion euros to 227 billion euros to achieve our connectivity objectives. And to do this, obviously, we need policy and regulatory action. We need policies to incentivize investments first. Then we need regulation that helps reducing network deployment costs and network operation costs. And of course, we need to address the demand side. We want our networks to be accessible by the citizens, by the subscribers.
So
Not
that's the point that we heard from Ms. Gonzalez,
Exactly.
bringing down the costs.
Exactly. We want our networks to be accessible to the citizens because the networks are not an objective per se. It's a platform for the digital transformation of the society and the economy, but also in order to be the networks themselves financially viable. So we can give some examples of policy and regulatory action that helps in this direction. European Commission recently published a proposal for Gigabit Infrastructure Act. It has to do with the optimization of civil engineering costs for the deployment of networks and also optimizing administrative procedures. European Commission also proposed a Gigabit recommendation in order to incentivize investments and also promote infrastructure sharing, which is a very useful policy to reduce costs. We can, and I always say that if we want to achieve these very ambitious connectivity objectives, we need to look at hybrid technology solutions. For example, fiber is a great technology, but we all know that can be deployed without subsidies only in densely populated areas. We can use other technologies complementary for rural areas where we have an issue, like fixed wireless access or even satellite connectivity. And we can also think about parallel deployment of fiber networks and 5G, the fiber to the home, fiber to the antenna co-development, in order to share fiber infrastructure and reduce costs. And these are only few examples of what we can do to address the challenges.
I'm going to dive into that a little later on in our discussion, but thank you for opening out a whole range of options for us. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cough. So let's step back. We've had many different aspects of meaningful connectivity discussed before us, but let's take it back to our question, which is the connection with global growth, right? So I'm going to ask Mr. Lamanauskas from the ITU to do exactly that. What role does connectivity play in the 21st century economy? And what are the challenges to connect the unconnected?
So thank you very much, Nisha. And indeed, it's great to be part of the panel. I'm especially impressed that we have here both the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Technology people, from both sides. And I think that's sometimes a challenge to really bringing those both parts together. And great to see that this panel really achieving that. And of course, really great place to discuss this topic in Georgia, with the Silk Road Forum, but also seeing the big commitment of Georgia and Georgia's government to digital connectivity. So from declaring internet access as a fundamental right, probably one of the not that many countries in the world and having that in constitution. So, and then to, of course, having ambitious plans for 4G coverage to 99%, and today we heard additional plans for submarine connectivity, which is, I think, also very commendable to also looking at the demand side of that, supporting SMEs and businesses as well in terms of digital adoption. So now, zooming out, why it's important to connect. So let's remember, and I think we heard a little bit in the beginning today in the opening session about the world we live today. We heard a little bit about the conflicts and wars and other aspects, but we also know about the general challenges of development in the world. So we are now at the midpoint, what is called the Sustainable Development Agenda, and which started in 2015, is supposed to be achieved in 2030, and regretfully, the G Summit had to note this year that we're only 50% in. So that means only 15% of the goals are achieved. So we really need any help we can to achieve that. And of course, digital is then a powerful tool to do so. So our SDG Digital Acceleration Agenda, launched in conjunction with the SDG Digital Summit, identified that around 70% of SDG goals would benefit from Digital Boost, and would definitely, definitely that Digital Boost would help us to get closer to where we need. Well, of course, we look from the economic perspective, and I think Charles and I compared the numbers before to make sure that World Bank and I2 says the same. But but definitely we see that.
And did they match?
They did, yes, of course. We quoted each other's numbers, so it's like, and then credited each other for them. But anyway, in any case, we have a clear increase in economic growth that's demonstrated through the increase in broadband. So that's definitely there as well in a very direct way. So we have that importance of both in a broader development aspect, and then, of course, in narrower economic development. So where we are now with that, we still have, and we say, the digital divide is decreasing, but it's now still 2.6 billion people offline, as per our recent number. And that double-digit growth of broadband penetration that we saw during COVID now tapered off. So now we still have, of course, growth, but not as high growth, and we still have a pretty high number of people not connected. And our colleagues in GSMA said that in South Caucasus and Central Asia, around 50 million gap here. So we definitely need to bring infrastructure close, and I think that's what Georg also said, like that we need to bring that there. But we also have what is called usage gap, and that's also pretty strong. So actually, again, the statistics said that we have majority of the world has the connectivity, live within the connectivity. So 95% of the world population live within the range of mobile broadband. However, only 1 out of 3 of them actually use that. And even in Georgia, with all the connectivity, at least again, colleagues at GSMA quote 52% of usage gap. So
and the usage gap is partly due to costs, I presume, but is there other elements to it?
Exactly. So we talk about affordability, and I think we mentioned that. We talk about skills. That's very rightly in your chart. We talk about content as well, and we talk about broader adoption. And that also means that we need to tackle that problem for both sides. We need to tackle the both the infrastructure gap, if you will, but we also need to work very hard to tackle the coverage gap. And maybe I'll leave there, and I think there will be some follow-up questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for putting the economic factor right into the heart of our discussion. Let's look at some actual policies that could take us closer to this goal of meaningful connectivity. And I'd like to ask Mr. Cormier from the World Bank, what are you actually doing at the World Bank? Do you have any initiatives, strategies that you're implementing to try and accelerate connectivity?
So first of all, thank you for the question, and I wanted to thank the government of Georgia for inviting us to this very important event, a very timely event where we're dealing with multiple crises in the world, and we can see that it's great to sit down together and talk. And so I thought the other panels were trying to address problems of logistics, of energy crisis. Here we're talking about a transformation and a promise, and I'd like to sit on this panel. So I wanted to say that
it's about delivering that promise, right?
Well, let's get into it. So I wanted to say that the World Bank thinks that digitization is actually at the core of our mandate. The mandate that we have, of course, is poverty reduction on a livable planet. When we think about digitalization, we think about access and enabling productive use across society. And we think that digitization can tackle poverty, inequality, inclusion, and essentially has resilience. And so one of the crises we have in the world at the moment is, of course, inequality. We don't have enough women in the workforce, the exclusion of that. The youth are excluded. There's not enough employment. And so we think that digitization is a transformative opportunity of our time. We really believe that this becomes a core aspect of development. You'll see the World Bank create a new vertical on digital development, and we are tackling new global priority programs as part of our evolution roadmap. We're trying to be more responsive, and we are going to tackle essentially accelerating digitization. So we think this is a core mandate, the core of our mandate. Why is that? Well, in terms of GDP growth, we heard the numbers from Thomas. GDP growth, if you increase 10% of broadband penetration, you get GDP growth of 0.7 to 1.6%, which is huge. We're always looking for engines of growth in this time of anemic growth. Digitization is one of those engines of growth that's coming.
So the pivot is really meaningful.
The pivot, exactly. In the EU, the estimate is that additional GDP contribution of new digital technologies is estimated at 2.2 trillion euros by 2030, which corresponds to 5,000 euros per capita. So it's huge. And so the other thing is, in terms of job, as I said, there's lots of exclusion of the youth and women in particular. Digitization is a creator of jobs, new jobs, and different jobs. And so a third of the new employment in advanced EU countries are likely to be in jobs that don't exist yet, because digitization is a creator. And what we see is, in the world, half of those jobs will be in jobs that are highly skilled, and there's a multiplier effect of 2.5 to 4 times. In the developing world, we see even larger numbers of job creation. So across, in particular, SMEs. And so basically, digitization is growth, it's a job creator. And I want to get to the inclusion part. We saw during the pandemic.
Have a sip of water. So what Mr. Cormier is saying is that you invest a certain amount into digitization, what you get as your economic benefit is very effective, very cost effective. You get a lot out of it.
And if I want to talk about the inclusion, we saw during the pandemic that kids that did not have access to broadband, 30% of them fell way behind on education outcomes. And so the inclusion is also about having digital skills. So I want to, and in India, there's been a huge push to use digitization as a financial inclusion, and reached 35% to 80%, from 35% in 2011 to 2017, 80% of the population have access to mobile money and digital skills.
Did you say in India?
In India.
Yeah, and also access to government services through digitization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the last point, I'm going to run out of time. The last point I want to make is that we are in a crisis where the rural areas are left behind. We've heard that from others, and there is a concern that 2.6 billion people are not currently connected. So we have to do policy. So great that private sector comes in urban areas that are very highly populated. How do we create markets for rural areas and include them, and make sure that the poor, the rural areas are connected? Otherwise, we're going to create a huge development divide that is already there, but exacerbated by digitalization. So stay tuned. The World Bank is really, really interested in working with partners, and not just us, but we're going to work with others to try to figure out how do we incorporate digitization into development.
So quite similar messages there from Mr. Lamanauskas and from Mr. Cormier about digitization being at the heart of development, economic development. We heard about the SDG goals, and we just heard about the way in which you can bring societies and deliver growth. I was just wondering when you were speaking whether one of the reasons for the, I think, doubling of GDP per head that we heard this morning in some extraordinary stats.
Double-digit growth.
Yeah, in the last 5 years, and Georgia might have had something to do with digitization. But that's probably a leap too far. Let's hear from the last member of our panel. And I've left him to last because in some ways it's kind of a mystery. What has the post office got to do? The post office is like a 150-year-old technology, maybe even older. What has it got to do with digitization? Let's ask that very question to Mr. Marianne Oswald. Where do you see the post office in this digital journey?
Thank you, Ms. Pillai. Let me first start, as other panel members, to show my gratitude to the Georgian government for inviting us. And actually, 5 years ago, 2018, it was this hotel when I decided to run for DDG at Universal Postal Union. So bring some fond memories back. UPU will celebrate 150 years of existence next year. And we are sort of blessed industry, if I may say so, because out of this digitalization, internet, and all these changes, e-commerce actually emerged. And we are delivering e-commerce shipments around the world. I'm sort of representing 650,000 post offices around the world, and we are employing, if I may say, a little less than 5 million employees, and we are delivering growth. I have today, actually not today, since quite some time, an issue. Are we talking about growth, or should we talk about sustainable life in the future? The Montenegrin Prime Minister mentioned today, let's forget about the past, let's focus about the future. And I can share with you some numbers. I'm an economist by education, but I was always bad with numbers. My wife is a professor of mathematics, so we have a compensation in this field. If there will be no post office around the world, the GDP in countries will be 7% lower than it is. So post or the connectivity in our way of thinking is not about fabrics, cables, whatsoever. It's also a physical contact. There is a role of the post in the future when it comes to education, tourism, supporting vulnerable categories of underserved population, access in the very remote areas where usually people don't go. Out of 650,000 post offices around the world, there are 100,000 which are not online, and together with Japan and a generous contribution by Japan, we have a goal to make it online by 2030. This is a Connect.Post project.
And what difference would it make to bring this 1/6 of the network online?
Actually, it will bring more people being able to buy things online. It will bring more people to be connected because, as I mentioned, we are like sometimes called elephant in the room because of the huge and vast network we are having. But this industry, this sector is actually benefiting from digitalization of the society. Meaning, when I said we are blessed, some industries are declining while we are like pushed by e-commerce growth and enabling post to survive. And if I may add at the beginning something, we just finished Universal Postal Union Congress in Saudi Arabia 2 weeks ago. 1,000 delegates from 160 countries were present. And there was a very nice quote from a colleague from Samoa, the privileged region, if I may say, and he said that our work will be evaluated on the way how we are treating the most vulnerable people, most vulnerable organization, most vulnerable members. And this is the way how we try to see the future of postal services.
Yes, because they're in every community, and it's a way of bringing people on the margins of society and the margins of the economy back into the middle.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ostwald.
Pleasure.
So we've heard from all our panelists. Do you want to revise your answer to the Slido question? Just a quick reminder that you have an opportunity to go back and change your mind if you like. Okay? So let's move on. How do we make connectivity, this connected future, a reality, right? And I think it would be a good idea to start with the ITU perspective on that. So, Mr. Lamanauskas, what efforts do we need? What are the ingredients that we need now to make connectivity meaningful?
So thank you very much, and I believe I just can start opening up that question, and definitely there's a lot of ingredients there. But first of all, and maybe that's kind of continuing on what Kostas spoke about regulatory environment, and I think that's what we see regulatory policy, enabling regulatory policy environment as really one of the key ingredients. And we at ITU, we have what we call Generation 5 or 5th generation collaborative regulation concept, which really is about bringing all the industry around shared vision and shared goals here. And I think now we're also going beyond the industry regulation to, and again, to the to the much broader enabling investment environment and questions such as taxation and currency flows and others that also impact that. And I think that's where the huge opportunity for the governments is. Then the second is, of course, looking at the demand side through the skills development programs, through the attention to the content, including the local content, also cybersecurity. And of course, ITU is working quite a bit around the world on setting up CERTs, or cybersecurity emergency response teams and other infrastructural elements to help deal with that. But definitely that is a key element so that people don't only use the services but feel secure doing so. One key ingredient from our side is also broad partnerships, and really, that's also a recurrent theme probably in many of interventions, I would say, is really bringing all the people around together to complement with the skills and resources they have. Of course, ITU itself is the partnership platform. In addition to 193 member states, we also have nearly 1,000 sector members that we call, so that's private sector entities, academia, others that collaborate through ITU. But then we have also targeted partnerships, including such initiatives like ITU and UNICEF GIGA initiative that aims to connect every school and every student to the digital resources and digital world. And we so far are very proud to have, on the one hand, mapped connectivity for over 2 million schools, so how to setting out what's needed to connect them, and connecting around nearly 6,000 schools and 2.2 million students there as well. And of course, our broader partnership, we call it Partner to Connect Digital Coalition, that brings different companies and private public sector entities with the pledges towards digital development, both in their own countries and around the world. And so far we have 800 pledges at the tune of $32 billion to do that. So I think some of the ingredients here are important. Maybe just last point here, just having a few seconds to spare, is sustainability. And I think that's also, would like to insert that as an important aspect of a meaningful connectivity, if you will, because sometimes we talk about the digital as a solution, but I think increasingly we need to think that while we talk about it as a solution, there's also challenges that digital can create that we need to manage. And we increasingly talk about environmental impact of connectivity, environmental impact of data centers, environmental impact of AI, and I think that's something.
And they're massively energy hungry, as we know.
So massive energy
it is a real challenge.
So I think that's part of meaningfulness as well as we see it. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. We heard a lot this morning about regional connectivity, didn't we, at the opening ceremony? The importance of regional cooperation on the political level. But what does it mean in terms of digital connectivity? That's the question that I'd like to explore right now. So why don't we start with Georgian perspective, Ms. Gonsadze? What is it? Is it important, regional cooperation, to this particular issue?
Cooperation is always good. It's always important. It always brings synergies. And especially when we consider the geopolitical location that Georgia is situated in, this is particularly important. We often say that our geography is our blessing and our curse, being at the juncture of Europe and Asia and connecting for thousands of years those two worlds, has brought to us some resilience and some tolerance. I would say that irrespective of all the crises, all the challenges, territorial problems, sometimes not very nice neighborhood and so on, we continue to grow, we continue to develop, we continue to be enablers of connectivity. And the Middle Corridor, which was mentioned today many times, has many aspects, has many layers, has many dimensions, and one of them is obviously digital. The cable that already connects Europe to Georgia, undersea, and another one possibly upcoming, the most waited for feasibility study, I would say, is the one that the World Bank is currently doing for us. That's a submarine cable. I see Roland here. Submarine cable, both for electricity as well as digital fiber. So to bring more power to our regional cooperation, that is infrastructurally very important. Then another regional cooperation that is very important is regulations and rules, so that infrastructure can be used by others, that rules and regulations won't object that and will help them and bring the synergy again. And then there is also the rules and regulations policy-wise, having our EU aspirations, waiting for our answer to become EU candidates. And we need to also be compatible to the regulations the European Union is using, for example, right? So there are so many layers, again, in that regional cooperation that we need to adhere to. Georgia really poses itself and hopes that it could be a platform where our regional neighbors can have a platform where they can connect, talk to one another, and come up with solutions that is to the benefit of us all. So I guess today, and this panel or this forum or the morning today, this is one of the examples of that. So we really value that very much, and with our policies, we really contribute to that.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Mantasyan, we saw this morning at the opening ceremony a remarkable sight. Your Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Azerbaijan sitting on the stage together. And I wanted to see if I could ask you, in the context of digital connectivity, what is the regional scope and what are the regional limits? What can we expect regional cooperation to deliver?
I think it's a very important question, and thank you for highlighting that point. And I think, as the Prime Minister Pashinyan already mentioned, and he presented the crossroad of the peace and this format, I think I even presented to all of you. This is this file. But I think to any peace to happen, we need a trust. And when you think about the interest of the individuals, of the interest of the nations, I think there are a lot of things which is possible to compromise if we talk about the benefit of the humankind. And it's obvious that if we want to create the region, I think when we need to create that region and enforce that peace to happen in our region. In this fast-changing world, so many turbulences happening. Do we need another escalation anywhere? So this process of bringing the peace and founding it and creating the connectivity between the people, and what is most important, to create the trust between the nations and the technology, by the way. I'm grateful that Thomas mentioned about AI and the trust of technology. But before the technology to come to reach to any humankind, the regulation, the government authorities need to give it a validation to it to make happen. So when the conversation between the different governments is not going enough fast, it's limiting this potential. It's limiting the human development. It's limiting the personal stories. It's limiting the general growth of the region. And I think from this perspective, when we look to what potential can come under the Black Sea cable, the fiber optics cable, which can link the Europe to the Southeast Asia, as you say, or our region, it's amazingly huge. And if you look to the map of the global fiber optics map, this region is the less developed, I think. And this is a huge room to get invested and make it happen. I think this is a place where we all together need to put together our efforts to make it happen. It will be just beneficial for all the
Thank you so much, Dr. Mantasyan. So this region here in the South Caucasus could potentially be very important as this kind of nodal point, the transit region, linking Asia to Europe. That's the prize. Is that how Japan sees it? Nomura-san, what are your comments?
Yes, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, we recognize that Georgia is a nodal or connecting point between Europe and Asia. In the geostrategic sense, I consider Georgia to be a very important country, not only as a physical distribution network, but also a very important digital hub for information and communication infrastructure. However, in order to take full advantage of the benefit, we should be aware that it is indispensable, necessary to develop a secure and resilient telecommunications infrastructure. Moreover, it's important to strengthen Georgia's communications infrastructure and develop broadband network. But at the same time, it's also important for Georgia to serve as a base for data distribution and application provision through data centers, such as. This would enable Georgia to become a very important digital hub not just a
Can I
transit.
just interrupt you there for a minute? Are Japanese companies looking to set up data centers here?
Yes, I'm proud to say that Japan is to possess the advanced technology necessary for the development of that kind of infrastructure. And actually, recently, we just concluded a memorandum of cooperation in Georgian government, and based on this MOU, by involving relevant parties, we will start discussions to establishing a concrete examples of cooperation.
Very interesting. So it really brings the Silk Road right up to date into our 21st century world. So what are we going to talk about now? Yes, I wonder if we could have a look at what regional cooperation means to that very old technology, the postal service. You need to have regional connectivity, right? But when a sixth of the network isn't online, how do you make it meaningful?
Well, first of all, we have quite a lot of experience when it comes to regional cooperation within Universal Postal Union. We have several projects, just to mention a few, in Caribbean, where we are cooperating with Caribbean Telecommunication Union. We have projects in Africa with the African Telecommunication Union. I'm coming from a small country, Slovenia, and I would say that regional cooperation is like in my DNA, because we were always not forced, but sort of obliged to cooperate with neighbors. And actually, that's the second out of 3 or 4 reasons why I'm here attending this panel. We have a regional office in Tbilisi, and I'm happy that we have one of the best heads of the regional office here in Tbilisi, covering Europe and CIS. It's the one of 2 offices we have in Europe. The other one is in Istanbul, will be open shortly in Istanbul. And I still have a small slight of hope that Georgian government will be able to sign. That was the 3rd or 4th reason for me to come, to open formally the office, the regional office. And it's not a secret that...
and why is it important?
It is important because we believe that Georgia is the best in class in the CIS region. We have very trustful relationships since many years when it comes to postal services, the excellent cooperation we have with the ministry here in Georgia. And on top of that, we are considering to have a regional conference on digital transformation of postal services 2024 here in Tbilisi.
Ah, okay. So I'm sure everyone is invited to that one too. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Cormier, you said in your opening words that digitization is at the core of the World Bank's mandate, which is a very powerful statement, right? So put some flesh on that for us, please. How do international financial institutions come together with governments, the private sector, other international organizations to facilitate the development of connectivity?
So, well, first of all, we've heard some good examples this morning, right? So, I think that what I wanted to say is we look at a shared vision. So first of all, countries don't collaborate for the sake of collaboration. They need to understand what's in it for them. And coming back to Thomas's point, it comes back to having really credible economic analysis and cost-benefit analysis. And what we find is that in these types of projects, you see that the whole is better than the sum of its parts, meaning every country benefits by having shared opportunities. So that's where we start. And that's why we're doing this economic analysis for the Black Sea undersea cable, so critical to the core. What we heard this morning on the middle corridor is the issue of its cost comparison with other corridors is essentially a logistics problem. So then there's a shared vision because it's a cost issue. Coming back to why countries cooperate is because if they don't cooperate on a shared backbone, they don't have competition, and therefore there's a monopoly and the cost is going to be significant. So for meaningful digitization, you need to have affordability, and affordability means cooperation amongst countries so that there's a shared vision and a shared a backbone. I want to say that. How does the World Bank think about it? We think that digitization is now mainstreamed across every sector. We see it in the health sector, get better health outcomes. You see it in the education sector, get better education if you integrate in-class housing. You see it in jobs, in inclusion, so in infrastructure. So we think that the reason we think digitization is core is because it's becoming mainstreamed. How do we use it for the good and for addressing shared prosperity, growth, and so on. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. So Professor Marsalis, you can give us how should I say it, maybe a more technical response to draw this round of questions to a close. What do you see as the key challenges to deliver a major expansion of networks technically and to make sure that they're safe and secure?
Well, thank you indeed. There are technical issues in the deployment of very high capacity networks like fiber networks and 5G networks that we still need to change our way of thinking about. So one of the main challenges we are facing these days in Europe with regards to fiber deployment is how to transform homes passed to homes connected. So far, investments and deployment of fiber had to do with homes passed, fiber reaching a building or a household, but there is this last part of connectivity that is very cost demanding. And
so just say that again, spell it out. You can get the fiber to the building, but getting it actually to the apartment is the challenge.
In the end, we want to have this gigabit per second connectivity as the European Digital Decade Policy Program defines as objective for 2030. And this is what really matters. And we need to do this in the most cost-efficient way in order to have services that are then afterwards more accessible to the end users. And from that point of view, we feel that we need to start thinking about this fiber to the home connectivity in a more flexible way. So this means fiber can reach the most cost-efficient point, but then we can reuse cabling infrastructure in the buildings that can still transmit 1 gigabit per second signals to the end user, so we avoid paying the penalty of rebuilding fiber in existing buildings. This is a key challenge we see these days in Europe in our effort to...
So we need to think about these kind of compromise hybrid options.
It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid.
Hybrid to compromise, but...
I would say technology-neutral approach to have this gigabit per second connectivity for all users.
So one needs to be practical about this in order to deliver it.
We need to be practical because networks deployment is very cost-demanding, and we feel that if we can reduce these costs, then services will be more accessible for the end users, because in the end, it's the demand that we need to optimize.
Thank you very much. Let's have a quick fire round now. Of course, some of the questions of some of the themes we've already heard, plus a few extra ones. I'm very interested in this undersea cable that you keep talking about, Ms. Gunsatze, and we also heard from Charles Cormier. So you've already got one. Where are you at in terms of the getting to the next one, and how significant is that?
So the fact that almost everybody who knows the region mentioned cable in our previous responses, I guess, signifies the importance of one more connectivity in digital sector. The submarine cable is very well anticipated. I would honestly say, I guess, because of the feature that it can transmit electricity. So the feasibility study that the World Bank is doing now for us has the options to be studied of doing it as a twin project or a parallel project, both electricity and digital. So digital is not a very new thing as a cable. Electricity is more sophisticated, so you would hear about this cable many times, and sometimes many times in the context of energy security and energy independence, and not only digital. But obviously for digital as well, that is very important to have another space, another dimension to that. The government's
So
interference...
it's about expanding the capacity.
Expanding the capacity and making better connections and high-speed connections, more affordable, more accessible, and so on, where we started from. The government's interference in general are needed, I guess, in projects which are very large and very significant, and the private sector needs some kind of reassurance that the participation will help the project to be successful, and on the last miles, when it's not profitable, to bring it to the high mountainous rural areas where they use it the most. To have a hostel in a very high mountainous region in Georgia is possible now because they can rent it out on Airbnb having Wi-Fi, right?
Yes.
So before that, they would never get those guests. So this is where we see our role. But again, the digital, from our perspective, is again seen as a very private-driven project with the reassurances given from the public government interference as needed to make it more secure.
Thank you. So we're talking about digitization, and so far we've managed to avoid all mention of AI. How did that happen? I'd like to ask some of our panelists about what they think is the role, the overlap really, between AI and potentially the transformation of the ICT industry, making it more efficient, driving down costs. Nomura-san.
Okay, thanks for the question. I recognize that AI is a catalyst for great change in ICT industry, in particular when we see the recent and rapid development of generative AI. So, for example, by using AI, our work would be extremely efficient. However, what many people understand, or at least can agree, its benefit, we also recognize that there are people who are concerned about the risks involved, such as misinformation, disinformation, or fake news. So in this situation, this year, as a G7 chair country, Japan has launched the Hiroshima AI process and has been working with G7 countries on international rulemaking. In September of this year, we adopted a ministerial declaration. So in advancing these discussions, we have been asking the opinions of multi-stakeholder groups through various events. And based on these discussions, recently, G7 members created the International Draft Guiding Principles for organizations developing advanced AI systems. And it is now under the public consultation. Moreover, G7 members are also considering to establish the code of conduct for organizations developing AI systems. We are also interested in other discussions such as held in the Council of Europe as for AI treaty. Thus, there is an ongoing discussion regarding AI, especially for generative AI, and its impact on various areas, including ICT. At this moment, I think it would be very important for us to continue dialogue and to define what will be the common grounds regarding our relationship with AI. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamanakis, how do you see the role of AI in driving digitization and connectivity?
Well, first of all, indeed, it's something that captures now everyone's, let's say, attention. You know, whether it's a hyper-real thing, I think we're yet to see, you know, and which ways in between. And today is an important day in that regard because Secretary General Antonio Guterres is launching his high-level advisory body on AI today that will be working on a governance models on AI and advising member states on that. And indeed, if you looked at the policy discussions in the recent high-level segment of UNGA, where heads of state and governments come, 39 speeches were devoted to AI, or not devoted, but mentioned AI, and people who count said 6,279 words, you know. Probably they used AI to count that, you know. But definitely it is something that's very high in the mind of policymakers. And I think there's two sides to that. Sometimes in the public discourse, we talk about the risks now, and of course it's very important. I'll mention that in a minute. But of course, that potential transformative aspect is also important. And I think, and that transformative aspect on the specific areas, like digital, what Charles mentioned, digital for agriculture, health, education, the same with AI. And I think that's what we need to think through. It's not about AI as technology, it's how we apply that. And of course, so ITU we, together with our sister agencies, 40 of them, compiled the UN activities on AI field, and we identified nearly 300 projects that in various ways try to apply AI in helping sustainable development. And we're now having different partnerships in that regard, including on AI and health with WHO and WIPO, on AI in agriculture with FAO, as well as working on AI and natural disasters. So definitely huge potential. Now, a few seconds on the risks, and indeed there is a risk, but one big risk is not to be able to use and leverage AI, and I think that's always important to remember, because we still have too many people who are just observing the developments rather than using. And of course, then there is a built-in policy, built-in people's ability to manage the understanding of AI, that risks that come like bias, transparency, misinformation, and I think we're yet to uncover that. But I think definitely it's important to understand this technology that we can use for good, as our flagship event, AI for Good Summit says, but we need to manage the risks of that as well.
And it will touch everything.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Honestly, if you're feeling sympathy for me, don't. I'm on the way to good health. Mr. Oswald, what's the role of AI going to be in terms of logistics, e-commerce, the transformation of the Postal Service?
As an introduction, allow me to say that we at Universal Postal Union are sponsoring letter writing competition for young generation. And this year, during the Congress, I had actually an honor and privilege to be in your role, moderating 3 kids, one from Vietnam, a boy, and 2 girls, one from Kenya and one from Portugal. So the young lady from Kenya, she won this letter writing competition. And while I asked her, I was of course briefed, she was very much into the robotics, smart robotics. And having 3 teenagers, aged 12, 13 years old, it's not so easy to discuss with them. So, and I asked this lady, Claire, the winner, aren't you afraid that we will lose our jobs in the future because of artificial intelligence? And she made a very nice comment. She said, no, we will have to work less. So this is the meaning of artificial intelligence in a positive way. We at the UPU, we are handling millions of data. You can imagine that every day billions of goods are traveling around the world, and we are an intermediate between origin country and destination country. And in between is customs. So for customs purposes, we are exchanging billions of data, and without effective use of artificial intelligence, that would not be possible.
Oh, it's a great screening tool.
Yes, to diminish the risk analysis.
Fraud. Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
That's the
practical application.
Yes.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Oswald.
Pleasure.
Last reminder to visit the poll. Change your mind if you want to, because our discussion is soon drawing to a close. We haven't yet discussed the human factor very much, have we? The digital skills gap. How do we make sure that the elderly, the poor, those whose education isn't very good, are part of this digital journey? And I want to put that to you, Mr. Mantashian, because you started off talking about the young man from Africa who said to the politician, I voted for you because you brought it to my doorstep. So how do we close the digital skills gap?
First of all, I want to react on AI. Thank you for that question. But AI is important to mention that AI is a tool. And any tool can be weaponized. And any tool can be opened up in other perspectives. When we talk about creating the digital public infrastructure, we're also opening up the doors, giving the access to a lot of technology, especially on AI, which is so affordable right now and accessible. So it requires a lot of efforts to regulate and create the protocols of application of the AI in specific fields. This is a hard conversation.
But there's no regulation right now, isn't there?
There is a lot of efforts, there is a lot of tries, there is a lot of announcements from the different international organizations, but on the country level, it's just about to start. But why I touch this? This is the importance of giving the value of what we are doing, how we are doing, and for whom we are doing. If we are not ready to answer very blindly on these questions, we will leave the big gap, which will create another crisis for the human race. That's why this is my response when you said what's the humanization here. That the responsibility, which is it's on our shoulder of the public leaders and the international regulators currently, it's a huge. I want everybody to take this responsibility with a huge respect and the readiness. Even we talk about the postal service. I mean, we're being blocked for 3 decades, but we are developing the economy and we have a connectivity. Even the postal service, we called last year the rising star in the postal service because due to digital communication, you're able to move the physical goods. That's the very simple thing of the physical and digital communication. And when we talk about the gap and dehumanization, this is all about empowering the people to get the skills to reach their dreams, to make it happen. And it's important to
And not to be
work
left
with them.
out.
And not to be left out. This is the way the Armenia is also being connected to the global network, be able to create the IT companies which is being able to develop the solutions. And when it comes to the AI, currently I want to highlight this thing which is nobody mentioned yet. The digital infrastructure is giving the access to the tools which you can use for developing your AI.
So we're having a kind of future-looking conversation here, aren't we? But what will the networks of the future look like, right? And who better to put that question to than Professor Marcellos?
Well, I think it's very good to follow up on the AI discussion to reach networks of the future, because alongside all other applications of AI, AI will be also part of the networks of the future. We will have AI systems on optimizing the use of resources in networks, the network operation, the network energy efficiency, which is quite relevant to this sustainability discussion we have. With regards to vision for networks of the future, I would say that future networks will not be only about speed, as we used to know so far. Speed will become less relevant. We saw that in 5G. We'll see it more in 6G. And networks of the future will be not about the infrastructure per se, because this is transparent to the end user. Networks of the future will be about the new services they will offer. New, complex, socioeconomically transforming services integrated in
I'm going to stop you there. If it's not going to be about speed, then what will it be about?
It's going to be about the services that the subscribers, the consumers will be able to use over these networks. And if I can give examples, the driving automation that we have been discussing quite a lot also in the context of 5G, telemedicine and e-health, even very high quality voice over IP and instant messaging. These are services that will transform our day-to-day life. And all these services have one thing in common. They do not just need a higher speed network, they need also other quality of services. They need a different type of transport layer service, secure and resilient. They need software-defined type of network. They need network slicing type of services as in 5G.
And stability, I suppose.
Reliability, resilience, security, all these different quality of services, and not just speed.
That's really interesting. So for the digital world, the future to come to us and touch every sector of the economy, it needs to be something rather more than we have at the moment. And the focus will move away from speed so that we have a much more secure, robust digital infrastructure. Thank you very much, Professor Marcellos. And so that hopefully will bring us to where we began. What is the economic dividend? What is the prize if indeed we do have connectivity touching every aspect of our economy, which it doesn't at the moment? Mr. Cormier.
So I think I've touched a bit in my earlier interventions. The economic dividend of digitalization is huge, right? So we are in an anemic, let's say, economic recovery after post-COVID. When you look at what are the engines of growth, you see maybe the clean energy transition will incentivize, private sector investments and be an economic stimulus. But in reality, it's really hard to imagine where will growth come from, and growth will come from this because it transforms every sector. So no, we're not there yet. But when you think about the South Caucasus, the economy in South Caucasus depends on logistics because of the location, energy trade now and trade, agriculture, tourism, all those sectors are highly digitized in other countries. And for the South Caucasus to remain competitive, it has to catch up. And so we actually see what's at stake is essentially the basis of growth will have to be some form of digitalization. And what this means for this region is to bring the cost down, affordability, reliability, all of those aspects have to be addressed. It's not just essentially about speed, it's essentially about even security. So affordability, reliability, and security of the services.
You've drawn together the different elements, the different threads of our discussion very beautifully there, Mr. Cormier. Thank you very much. Shall we have a look at the poll result now? If you go can we have a big reveal on the screen?
Digital.
I have on my phone.
Slido, yes. How about it? You can
Okay,
be,
show
you can you can be you can come. What does it say?
It's saying it didn't change that much, by the way.
It hasn't changed.
57% is infrastructure development, 25% is policy harmonization, you can see on the screen, 13% skills development, and 5% is data flow.
Oh my word!
So we have to stay an
So it's
extra
pretty-
hour. We have to stay an extra hour. We can't close.
I think we need to continue this discussion, right? To bring the others right into the center of the discussion. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like if I may.
Okay, please.
Because in the beginning, specifically I entered in the beginning to see what would be the result. And there was a small difference. So the infrastructure development was in the beginning 67% or 68%. It's a little bit dropped. And increased the policy harmonization. Data flow stayed similarly, and skills development, very small development, 1%. So, or we communicate not that much well, or we proved something which was quite well known before. The infrastructure development is something which everybody is, I don't want to use the word struggling, but filling the space where it should be invested in the first.
Yeah.
But of course, any investment in infrastructure development without clear policy harmonization will be limiting. So I think these two things, which is the top two, need to become together. And I think this is a little bit outcome of maybe of our panel, where we need to all together unite efforts to work together. This will be my small sum up of our panel.
Mr. Lamanoskas.
So I think for me it's more a case of proof being in the pudding, you know. So I think infrastructure development is that most visible thing that we can touch and see, you know. Do we have it or we don't? People connect or not? But to actually achieve that, all the other aspects contribute to this, you know. So if you don't have right policy framework, if you don't have people skills, if you don't have data flows that enable cross-border trade, you know, infrastructure development will not happen, you know. So for me, it's not about which one is important. It's like, how do we measure that? What's the yardstick? And I think that way, these don't contradict, you know.
Indeed. Quick response from Professor Masoulas?
Well, infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure is the platform, for sure. I mean, most important. But we need also the other parts. Policy harmonization is required to achieve this. Skills development is the demand driver, so we need everything.
I want to comment again. One thing is here, definitely all of the skills and data flow is indeed it. But if we're not ready to create like a road, if you're not building the road, nobody will come follow this. So that's why we highlighted this too. But I think that all of the four have the important play to play. This is the common agreement.
Mr. Oswald.
Actually, I disagree with what we are saying
Oh,
here.
good. We had some
I
disagreement.
find an interesting part.
Actually, I now live in Switzerland, and actually where the infrastructure is state of the art, the best one. I think we should go back to the basics, meaning building infrastructure is critical. We should start building infrastructure. Public infrastructure is the most important one. Actually, I'm quite disappointed that only 59% of us here, I did not vote actually, but anyway, it's basic. We should all do our best to invest in infrastructure.
I do agree.
No, from Dr. Tashin. We'll have private conversations later. I am going to wrap up this meeting because we are just about out of time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have learned a huge amount. And for me as an economist, not as a tech person, the thing that I've learned more than anything else is the potential for digitalization and meaningful connectivity to be this accelerant for growth and touch every sector if we make sure that the infrastructure is there, but that it's also robust and that it's secure and that it's stable. So we move on to the next the next level, as it were, of connectivity. And that's not what I expected to hear at the end of this meeting. So thank you very much to our guests. Let's put our hands together to say thank you, Professor Marcellus. Thank you, Mr. Lamanauskas. Thank you, Nomura-san. Thank you, Ms. Gonzadze. Thank you, Dr. Mantashian. Thank you, Mr. Oswald. And thank you, Charles Cormier.